Continuing with part 2 of Sponsored Name Segmenter, let's now move above the line on the segment page. As mentioned earlier, one thing that is different about Sponsored Name Segmenter than the other segmenters in Denari is that it performs actions, and they are found in the action field. Starting at the top, we have checked out to donor and checked to event. You could use this to check out a group of sponsored names to either a donor or an event. First, you might select a filter, let's say community. You might want to work on getting sponsors for the children in a specific community, so you will select that in the community filter field. Next, select the action. If you're checking them out to a donor, you'll need to move to the checked out to donor field and select a name record from your data. If you're checking them out to an event, you'll need to select an event in the checkout to event field. And by the way, events are appeal codes. Now, click the Run Segment action. Denari will run the segment, find the sponsored names with that community code, and mark them as checked out. And of course, you could use other filters as well. We're simply using community as an example here. The next two actions on the list are Clear Checked Out Donor and Clear Checked Out Event. So you can save this segment, and when you want, come back and choose one of those options in the return the sponsored names that will return the sponsored names back to their non-checked out status by selecting one of those actions and running the segment again. And of course, you could clear all names by using no filters below. You may remember we mentioned earlier that if you use no filters or select no filters, you get all names. And so by choosing one of the clear options and selecting no filters, you'll clear all the names in your list. The count action is just that. It will give you a number of names identified by the segment, and the report will go to your inbox. The next action is put name into class. This refers to classifications that work in a similar way to classifications for donors. However, they are a different set of classifications. You can create your classifications or codes and assign them to your sponsored names. This action allows you to assign them in mass. For this to work, you'll need to go to the Update Sponsored Name Class field and select one of your classifications. Now you'll select the action and then run the segment. Denari will then assign that classification to the sponsored name identified by the filters that you've chosen below. The next two, Put on Hold and Queue for Photocard Printing, are fairly self-explanatory. Choosing one of those and running the segment will either put the group identified by the filters on hold or check the box for photocard printing. You can also provide a reason for the hold by selecting something from that field as well. You also have the Take Off Hold option here near the bottom of the list, and that will allow you to uncheck that hold box in the sponsored name record. Set eSponsor on and off will check or uncheck that box in the sponsored name record. That is the flag that helps to determine if a sponsored name will appear on the online community site or not. So you could, for example, remove an entire group of names from a community if needed by using that field as the filter. Set status to A, AP, or S changes the status field in the sponsored name record. It does not change the system status field. Remember, system status is the field that Denari calculates. Status field is the one that you can change and add to as needed. And then the last action is Update Spons Count. CNT stands for count, and it goes together with the New Sponsorships Allowed field. It allows you to change the number selected in the Number of Sponsorships field and then run the segment. Denari will find the sponsored names identified by your filters below and put that number in the number of sponsors for that name record. This assumes that you're an organization that allows multiple sponsors per child. There are some other fields in this section like Make Excel Spreadsheet, Print Labels, and Print Letters that perform their own action. However, they have one thing in common. You still have to choose something from the Action drop-down field. So if you want to create an Excel spreadsheet showing sponsored name data, you'll need to first check the Make Excel spreadsheet, and then also choose an action, usually that's going to be count from the drop-down field. Now when you run the segment, Denari will deliver a count and a link to the spreadsheet in your inbox. If you choose Print Labels, you can check that box and again choose Count. Denari will produce the labels for the sponsored names identified by your filters in an Avery 5160 format. And then finally, if you choose Print Letters, again choose Count and select the letter that you want from the search function. The letters that are created are an 8.5 by 11 page with the name and address of the sponsors of the sponsored names identified by your filters. The letter body will be the one that you select here. No other information is shown in the output. There are no sponsorship information included in this output. It is simply a letter to the sponsors. Again, the purpose of Sponsored Name Segmenter is to identify sponsored names and output sponsored name information. But what if you want sponsorship information? Remember that a sponsorship is a pledge, so sponsorship information can be found in Pledge Segmenter. One of the things that makes reporting from Denari so flexible is that we can link segments together. It is also one of the things that makes it confusing. It is helpful to remember that there's a lot of data being stored. Think about the name information, the pledge information, the sponsored name information, the gift information, etc. Each of those categories has multiple pieces of information, and you want to be able to filter on that information from time to time. So Denari organizes those filters into groups called segmenters, and we can link them together when needed. Let's say that we want to find out which of our sponsors are behind. Again, remember that a sponsorship is a pledge, so we can go to the Pledge Segmenter and filter to find those pledges that are behind. We don't need the Sponsored Name segment for that because the filters we need are contained in the Pledge segment. But what if we want those pledges that are behind confined to just the sponsored names from a specific community? We can first create a Sponsored Name segment that identifies the sponsored names from that community. We've already seen how we can do that. Now we can link that to the Pledge segment. So let's go to the Pledges tab and then Pledge Segmenter. We can create a new segment here or use one that we already have. So I'll click on Add New. We would give it a description and a code, just as we've seen in other segments, and then we'll expand the Pledge section. The first field we see here is Sponsored Name Segment. If we select our Sponsored Name segment that identifies all the children from a specific community, we can also then select filters from other areas of the Pledge segment. So we'll just pretend that this one is giving us the information from that community. So now I'll go down and expand the Statistics section, move to Ahead Behind. Here we're going to choose Less Than and put a 0 in the low value field. That will give us any pledge whose Ahead Behind field shows a negative number. So now when we run the Pledge segment, Denari will first run the Sponsored Name segment and find the sponsored names from that community, and then run the Pledge segment to find the pledges associated with those names whose Ahead Behind is less than 0. You can see that you now have the filters from the Sponsored Name segment and those from the Pledge segment available to you. That then allows you to link the Pledge segment to Pledge statements, for example, to run statements for just that group of people. And you can also link a Pledge segment to a Name segment to produce a list of names that meet all the criteria. And finally, you can even link a Pledge segment to a Gift segment to get gift information related to your filters. Again, it can be complicated, but it also gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. You just need to remember to think in terms of categories. This concludes the training video on Sponsored Name Segmenter. For more information on the other segmenters, you can view the videos on that topic from the training videos list. If you have any questions, you can contact tech support through the support button found in Denari.